Good afternoon, everyone, or I guess it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today we're actually going to be talking about the midterms. Hey, guess what? I'm back. So yeah, I wanted to give it a few weeks, and also I've been work. I wanted to give it a few weeks before I made any conclusions about the midterms because I was getting some mixed signals with polling. But if we look at polling right now, there's, well, a lot of red, but it's in areas that I'm really very interested in, or that I think really matter. So, yeah. And I could go to specific races, but I'm going to go to Georgia. And you may be wondering, why am I going to Georgia? And why, if the polling average is showing Warnock plus, a point, am I still calling the race for Herschel Walker, or saying that I'm pretty confident Herschel Walker's going to win? Well, as we could see all year, pretty much all year, Warnock was leading, and then all of a sudden it got really competitive right around Labor Day. Now it's showing Warnock is back ahead, but if we actually dig into this, Fox News shows no change from their previous polling. Okay, that's fine. Both candidates gained a point, but no change in the gap. That's not a big deal. Data for Progress show a tie. Okay, that's fine. And we have to remember that's a Democratic aligned pollster. What was their previous polling of the race? Here it is from July. Okay, they actually showed Walker ahead by 2, which is kind of interesting. But that was right when the news of the Supreme Court decision, Dobbs, that sample actually would have included some of that, but not enough to really make a difference. Okay, let's go to the next one. CBS, they don't actually have a previous polling, and they're showing Warnock up 2. Okay, Marist, they show Warnock up 2. Do they have a previous polling? And I am not seeing it. Okay. And they show Warnock up 2. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a local newspaper, they, I believe, use the University of Georgia as their pollster. Showing Walker up 2. Okay, do they have a previous polling? Yes, they do. They've actually got 2. So, right after the decision, that's a 5-point shift towards Herschel Walker. Okay. Quinnipiac, Warnock plus 6. That's a really good poll. But Quinnipiac, I've always said, tends to be an outlier that favors the Democrats by a lot. Case in point, you go back to their previous polling of the race, and it was Warnock plus 10. That's a 4-point shift towards Herschel Walker. Insider advantage, showing Walker plus 3. Well, do they have a previous polling? Actually, from middle of July. And this polling that came out recently was from right after Labor Day, and it shows Warnock plus 3. That's a 6-point shift towards Herschel Walker. And I can actually pull this little trick up and show you across the board that this type of a shift is happening. I can pull it from Wisconsin, where it shifted in favor of Ron Johnson. You want to see proof that I can do this? Let's find the right one. Here we go. Nevada Senate. So if we scroll back, Nevada Independent, they're a newspaper. Go back to the last time they polled this race. Here we go. Cortez Masto plus 8. New poll shows Laxalt plus 2. That's a 10-point shift. Trafalgar, and again, disclaimer, they are Republican aligned. However, they're actually a good pollster. Laxalt plus 4. What was the previous one? Laxalt plus 3. Okay, that's just a 1-point shift. Okay, insider advantage. Laxalt plus 3. Do they have a previous polling? Not on here. Okay, whatever. Data for progress. Laxalt plus 1. Do they have a previous polling? It's not showing up. Okay, how about the Hill, Emerson? So I'll just say Emerson. Did they have a previous polling after Laxalt plus 1? It actually turns out, yes, they do. Cortez Masto plus 3. Okay. So, yeah. And it's showing up in governor's races, too, because I did the same thing so that you wouldn't have to. I think this is I think Pennsylvania is an exception. It's a bit of an exception. But as you can see, it's gotten much closer for the Republican, and here's end of August. Yeah. That's a shift. Notice it's staying pretty constant, Fetterman plus a large amount. Then it gets all of a sudden about 4 points, and it stays right around that 4 to 4.5% gap. Okay, there we go. So even if we're taking the exceptions, it's still good. Okay, Ron Johnson versus Mandela Barnes. And right now the average is Ron Johnson plus... Wow, I didn't know it was that good. That's crazy. Or, that good. Okay, so there's 20... No, this is all in 2022. All right, so here we go. End of August. Watch this. Right when you'd start seeing the post-Labor Day samples coming in. That's a 4.5%, and oh boy. Yeah, so it's a funny little trick that's happening. Let's choose one that isn't competitive, that I'm aware of. Never has been competitive. Let's see. Yeah, they're not even tracking an average for that one. Okay. Is there one that's not competitive that I know they've been polling? New Hampshire Senate, maybe? I mean, calling it competitive is generous. No, okay, they don't have a trend line on this one. Well, I know they've got one. No. Well, let's just say Oregon governor. That's going to be an interesting one. Here's one. I thought that Brian Kemp was never really in doubt, but hey, we can look at this one too. So here's July. Abrams is still behind, but it's a 4-point lead for Brian Kemp, 3.5 at worst, and then all of a sudden Labor Day hits, and look at that. Now we're not even talking about a competitive election. Here's a Senate seat that probably shouldn't be competitive. And they don't have a trend line for it. Okay, never mind. I'm actually trying to look. Now, the weird one is the generic ballot. I mean, okay, so the GOP is actually... Okay... Here's about where the SCOTUS decision would be hitting. And notice how both the Republicans and Democrats have their valleys matched, but then the Republicans don't have a peak to match the Democrats. It's a little bit weird. But okay, sure. And then we fast forward. Here's the week of Labor Day. Looks like, oh, hey, Democrats aren't. Oh, there's the Republican jump. Is there enough polling in this one? Because I don't think so. There's one poll. Yeah. But yeah, so basically what we're talking about here is basically what we're talking about is a situation. Whoops, that's a governor's map. Is a situation where the Republicans really are rebounding from their summer. At least that's what the data is showing to me. I don't think it will be enough to win in Pennsylvania, but it should be enough to win in Wisconsin and Nevada and Georgia. Colorado is an interesting one because the Republicans nominated the right candidate for Colorado. And yeah, I think the Democrats are running too one-dimensional of a campaign. And in Colorado, you've got actually the types of Republicans campaigning with O'Day there. And George W. Bush, and I want to say Greg Abbott too, which is kind of interesting. I know Glenn Youngkin has also campaigned there. Somebody else who has experience winning is a Republican in a blue state against a somewhat popular former, or either incumbent or former incumbent. Washington, I think the polling is interesting enough right now that I'm not going to put it as safe, but I'm pretty confident that Patty Murray's going to win that, even if there's polling that indicates it's competitive. I just don't really see that being 100% accurate polling, but who knows? I've seen it from both a Republican-aligned pollster and from Democratic-aligned pollsters, and Washington tends to be weird in midterms anyway, so it's entirely possible. So, yeah. Now, if we move on to the House right now, this would be about a Republican 20-seat gain, 24-seat gain. How many seats did... Go... I want to see. I need to see the House. There we go. That's not what I wanted. There we go. So right now, the current House, without any vacancies right now, is sitting at Republicans at 212 with 3 vacant seats. And 220 seats to the Democrats. So Republicans, they really only need a handful of... They only need to net a handful of seats in order to flip control of the chamber. Let's say they were able to win those 3 vacant seats. It would be 215 to 220. They need to flip 3 seats. Right now, as it is, Republicans need to flip 5. They need a net gain of 5 seats. I'm betting, and this map right now and this forecast right now shows 239 seats for the Republicans to 196 for the Democrats. That's a net gain of 27. I think the Republicans are going to net somewhere between 25 and 35 seats. It's entirely possible they get more than that, but with the way redistricting is gone, I'm not entirely positive about that one. And there's definitely pickup opportunities, for example, that I've left off the table. And you also notice I've got Washington as a Democratic hold right now. And the reason for that is because I don't think that the runoff is going to favor the right Republican to win a runoff. Basically, the way ranked choice voting is going, I don't think Palin can win a statewide election in Alaska anymore. So, yeah. And that was kind of proven, because Republicans actually outperformed in that special election if you look at the first balloting. 60% voters wanted a Republican to represent them in that special election. And that's an overperformance for the Republicans in Alaska. However, less than 50% wanted Sarah Palin to represent them, saying, we'll take our chances with a Democrat. So basically, 10% of people who voted for a Republican, or 10% of the general electorate who had voted for a Republican, so about 16% of Republican voters said that they'd take their chances with a Democrat rather than Sarah Palin. And it could have just been moderates voting for Begich. But still, 16% of the people who voted for a Republican candidate decided that they didn't want Sarah Palin. And that's 10% of the electorate as a whole, and that was enough for Begich to win. For Peltola or Petlota. I need to make sure I can say her name correctly. Peltola, sorry. Apologies to the representative. She's obviously running for a full 2-year term. And right now I have her winning, and that's solely because I think Palin is going to get more votes in the first and second rounds than Begich, and therefore Begich's the votes for him are going to be the ones reallocated. So it's not just trying to... and that's the thing people don't understand about ranked choice voting, is that it doesn't allow a lesser party to swindle their way into victory. It's more of a way to ensure that a majority of people at least approve of whomever wins the election. Which is not entirely a bad thing. And it does another thing. It also ensures that a more moderate candidate is going to win. For example, if we put ranked choice voting in, say, I don't know, here in Virginia, I suspect a moderate Republican would come out on top more often than a progressive Democrat. Because you're going to turn off voters who maybe don't hate the Democrats, but really don't want a progressive in office. And I could give you plenty of examples of, and this is a situation where people wanted a more moderate candidate, and, well, their options were a moderate Republican who isn't going to gain a majority of Republican voters, but is going to get a decent amount of independents, versus a Democrat who's going to get all the Democratic voters. And then you have a, more Trumpy Republican who kind of pushes people off, and also someone who's no longer a good fit for their state. And if you actually speak with Alaskans, they don't like Palin. And there's reasons. So Palin, I just don't think was a good fit. Anyway, we're going to go to the governor's races where, yes, you are seeing a red Oregon, right? There's a reason for that. Right now, polling is showing Drazen, the Republican, leading, but that's because we've got a situation like Oklahoma 2002, except less Oklahoma. Basically, less weird. So, there is a left-wing, a more Democratic-aligned third-party challenger who is gaining a significant sway of the voters. You could also look at this as Kansas, but the Democrats' version. So Kansas 2018, but the Democrats' version. Other than that, no real surprises. Michigan right now, polling is showing Whitmer's ahead significantly, and that for some weird reason, polls keep showing that Michiganders care about abortion above everything else. And I don't get it because it's the only place that's showing up. And you'll notice that's one topic I haven't discussed. And that's because right now it's looking like it's just completely unimportant for the election. You also notice I have Illinois and New York as, well, not safe. And I probably should have New York at least as safe. But I've seen polling showing that Zeldin is not completely getting blasted off the board. So, patience. Pennsylvania, Mastriano was not going to win that. Wisconsin right now, I'm biased toward, I always say err on the side of the incumbent, and for a long time I was saying that Tony Evers was not going to win re-election, but right now I think he might just escape with it. But it's entirely possible he loses that election. And I'm doing the same thing for Laura Kelly down in Kansas. Partially because polling is showing that she may have a slight edge. But, yeah. And that's the other thing is gubernatorial races tend to be a little bit less partisan. And a prime example of that would be to look at Vermont, where Phil Scott is a Republican, though a lot of Republicans these days would call him a rhino. He's the type of Republican who can win in Vermont, same as Charlie Baker could win in Massachusetts, same as Larry Hogan could win in Maryland. Now, it'll be very interesting to me to see how well Lee Zeldin does in New York. And by the way, for the record, I think if Cuomo was running, given all the turmoil he had last year, I'd actually have that favored for Lee Zeldin just because Cuomo wound up being that bad of a candidate, wound up being that much of spoiled goods. Anyway, so those are my forecasts as of right now. I think there's room for things to change, and especially in the House, I've left maybe a lot more competitive ground than I probably should, but I've also put some congressional seats as safe that maybe I probably shouldn't have. But I'm pretty confident in most of these. Also, you'll notice in Nevada, for example, I think if Republicans are winning the Senate race, they're going to pick up at least one of these 3 seats. Possibly more. Anyway, I want to thank y'all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time. Take it easy.